Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Inferno Cast. This is episode 057. I am Fox, host of said podcast and of YouTube's Inferno Fox Gaming channel. Inferno Fox Gaming has content regarding RPGs, Nintendo, retro gaming, and more. And the Inferno Cast is here on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and more. And as I say on every podcast, friendly reminder to moderate video game playing, touch grass, and help your partner, parents, or roommates around the house. Got a fun and pretty salient topic to go over today. And joining me in my wonderful cast and crew is Simbu Darkfang. He is the host of live streaming video games gameplay on the Scurryface channel that's on Twitch. We will have links in the description below to the exact location for Scurryface on Twitch. Simbu, thank you so much for joining us.
Where? Who? Me? Oh,
No,
yeah.
the guy to your
No.
left. No, the other left. The other left. Ah, you'll get it. You'll get it.
Always fun. Yeah, always fun to be here. And boo.
That's right. We're getting to be getting close to the spooky season. We at the Inferno Cast have a lot of spooky related content, full of what is probably almost all of our favorite season, or at least second favorite season. So we're gonna have a lot of fun with that. More details as the time goes on. Also joining on the fantastic cast and crew is Jason the 13th of the YouTube channel Jason the 13th. Jason, thank you so much for joining us.
Not a problem. Always glad to be here.
And we also have Hillbilly Hardicus. He is a good friend of ours and our resident hill slut. Hardicus, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. And grass is overrated.
It is only overrated if you try and eat it. Touch grass. Don't eat the grass. And last but not least, we have Jamie Owls 87, my partner and partner in crime. Jamie Owls, thank you so much for joining us.
Uh, Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here, and I did not eat any grass today, so I'm good.
The day is young. Jamie Owls, the day is young. And just a special shout out to Stormrosesky of the Twitch and YouTube channels of Stormrosesky, who couldn't make it tonight, as well as Astrimedes, developer and co-owner of Second Place Games. And finally, as we mentioned, it is spooky season. If you are in the Chicagoland area, definitely recommend that you check out Basement of the Dead, located in Aurora, Illinois. That again is Basement of the Dead in Aurora, Illinois. Fantastic haunted house environment, and can't recommend it enough for some family and not so family fun. Definitely a good time. No pre-discussion topic because we're gonna jump right into this because the topic for tonight is the ninth generation, and it's so it's failure to launch, really. And it's one of the things that Simbu and I talk about a lot. And it's of course, the generation about the PS5, Xbox Series X and S. And Simbu often calls it the next gen consoles. I often correct him, being all pedantic, and say, no, it's the current gen. But Simbu's overall sentiment here is something I've heard echoed among others, both in real life and here on the interwebs. And it just makes me wonder, like, why is this the case? Why does it seem like the ninth generation has failed to launch? So one of the aspects to this, I believe, is when these released, the PS5 and the Xbox Series system releasing in like November 2020, the year of COVID. So we got to ask, and I'm going to ask you guys, I'm going to start with Jason the 13th. Regarding COVID, what sort of impact do you believe COVID had on these releases, Jason?
Hmm. Other than prolonging some release dates, I'm not 100% sure what else it would have actually impacted on. I know shutting down certain things and getting the games rolling out slowly. I mean, I don't remember exactly how long it was, but for a while, my Switch was a $300 Zelda system. So, until they got more games rolling out way down the line. So, I could totally, I would put my money in that with everything closing up, that it just prolonged everything and let them, I don't know, just having issues figuring out some of their issues. I mean, it jacked up everything. So
No, it's definitely a fair assessment. Simba, what about you? What are your thoughts on that? It's sort of impact you think COVID had on the releases and launches of these two new systems.
Well, we all know that I could talk for a long time. Let Jamie Owls and Hardicus go before me.
So Simbu has elected to pass. Let me, Hardicus, let me ask you same question. Sort of impact you think COVID had on the releases for these consoles?
Um, well, for those that actually practice things like social distancing, like I think, not actually going out to the store probably had a little bit to do with it. Um, Correct me if I'm wrong though. Didn't like the PlayStation 5 had some severe like inventory issues when it first came out, where it was either impossible to find or scalpers had purchased all of them. Like to this day on my Facebook Marketplace, I still see people selling the original PS5 for $600 in my area on the marketplace, and I think it's probably scalpers that have had them left over that they couldn't move, and they're trying to get as much as they can for them because I think that's inventory issues is probably a big part of it.
Like the overall supply chain,
Yeah,
that
supply chain
really.
issues with people being sick or social distancing, not going outside, things like that. I think all of that, there may not be one specific thing, but I think all those combined probably had a pretty significant issue on like early, availability.
And it just makes you wonder, like, okay, so you got all these scalpers scalping all these systems. They're just buying the individual systems. They're not buying any of the games that came out at the time, like the remaster or remake Demon Souls and other such launch titles and everything. They just want the system. And the problem is these console companies live and die by the attachments. They don't make the money on the system. It's really going to be the extra stuff. So like you got all these scalpers buying with their wondrous bots, and by wondrous I mean god awful. There's that attach rate's not happening. The company, yeah, the consoles are selling out, but they're not going to make money because the actual people who would play them aren't buying the games and the controllers and all that crap. So it ends up being a thing where, okay, where's the urgency to want to bring more systems in when we're not, the end consumer isn't actually buying anything with the attach rate. So that's something that I've never seen uh, stats on was when the PS5 and Xbox Series X/S, more the X than anything, what the attach rate was for the original sales compared to like the PS4, PS3, like what was the attach rate for games and controllers and whatnot. But Jamie, I was be again because Simbu had passed. I'm really going to be really curious on his thoughts on this. But what are your thoughts on the sort of impact you think COVID had on these releases?
I think when COVID happened, how everything just stopped, including like supply chain production and mostly inventory was more about the necessities versus the wants. I think that had a lot of impact, and also with what Jason the 13th and Hillbilly have said, um, delaying some of the release dates, and also with the PS5, that whole nightmare of people unable to buy one because of the whole bots issue, and um sorry, the whatchamacallit, when people are reselling them online.
Oh yeah, scalping.
Scalping, thank you. I just I think it's just delayed the whole process of people normally just going out into the store and buying them and then going through a time where you couldn't. So that kind of like put like a weird way of living for people. And I think it's just kind of lot people lost just perception of time over that.
Yeah, and it's one of the things when we talk about the supply chain issues too, like yeah, you guys know have a reputation to be a Nintendo fanboy, but if anything, I'm also one of said biggest critics, Nintendo, one of Nintendo's biggest critics, and this was a real life issue. COVID and everything, these were real issues versus the fake or false scarcity that Nintendo has known to have done in the past with the Nintendo, the Super Nintendo, the Game Boy, and attempts with the Nintendo 64, where it's this, okay, there's been proof of this with the NES and SNES. So let's put in an order for 500,000 units to all the Walmarts in 1988. And Nintendo's like, no, we're going to give you 125,000. That's all that we're going to do. And then there'd be no explanation, no other anything like that. So that's sort of like scarcity driving up the demand. This is a really trying time because COVID really was an actual, this was not a falsified attempt to drive demand. These were real events. We wanted these systems. We just couldn't get them. Simbu, your thoughts on the sort of impact you believe COVID had on these releases?
Pass.
Okay, so a
You know,
more
pass go.
So, as Jason the 13th and Hardicus and Jamie Alice have said before, there is, the social distancing aspect. There's the supply and demand. For example, the 14-day quarantine, the 14-day mandatory quarantine for anybody that was entering the country. Not to mention, like if the PlayStations were put on the ship in Japan, sailed to the United States for production, or not production, but for retail. That ship, when it got to port, was quarantined for 2 days, or for 2 weeks, 14 days, because of the people on the ship. Or was it 10 to 14 days was a mandatory quarantine for something like that.
yeah. So not only the 10 to 14 day quarantine, at that time, there was also the large backlog of those ships at the ports that just weren't being processed on top of everything else. So, Simbu, you were right on the money, and then some. Like, not only is that quarantine in place, but that long, I have the mental image in my head of all the ports and everything just sitting there. There's no workers, nothing moving, and it was like 1 to 2 months at least, and it took like half a year to even get through half that backlog. Sorry, simply continue.
Go for it. But and again, it's that first in, first out kind of thing. But again, the problem becomes is when all these ships are at the port, the first in is now blocked. So the first in can't easily get first out. It's not like, think of Chicago traffic at rush hour on the Eisenhower. It is gridlocked. So all these ports are gridlocked. So everybody who has finished their 10 to 14-day quarantine, they can now be off. They can now only now can they be offloaded.
And
And
imagine that gridlock where, okay, even if you do get offloaded, your path to exit is completely blocked by other ships. So how are you going to be able to exit when there is no exit, and then go and across the Pacific to try and load up and get more cargo when you can't leave the port, even if you are unloaded, because there are still so many ships behind you that are backlogged. And this was just one of the many aspects to the difficulties with this. This is just supply chain, and we touched upon a little bit of the human factor here. Simbu, am I missing anything? Are we missing anything else, you think?
oh, we're missing a lot. Um, let's continue with supply chain. The silicone shortage that happened around 20, what was it? Late 2021, early 2022, the silicone shortage. Sony could not get the chips or the a couple key components to manufacture the PS5s to have them run the same way as the original model, which they ended up coming out with the Series 1100. Then they came out with the Series 1200. So that original 1000 series PS5 was then had to be changed and modified to the 1100, but still produced at the same amount. Well, when you have silicon shortages and you have things like that, well, guess what happens? Not only are the scalpers grabbing up all the PS5s that they can get, well, you're going to have companies that gather up all the materials that they can get. Why? So then they can go ahead and scalp Sony or any other tech company that's trying to get those parts. So again, you have scalpers at the base level from consumers scalping each other, and then you had corporate scalpers
And
along the lines of that.
yeah, and Simbu is 100% correct. I want to say that shortage did start around like 2020 because it was something where it not just impacted the console market, but I remember it was also something with the like the phones where
any
Apple had
smart car too.
yeah, and where the Apple had committed and pre-bought a plethora of these chips from a lot of these Chinese manufacturers, beating a lot of the other smaller companies to the punch. At one of my past lives at a previous job, one of the technologies we were trying to roll out for like this was chemical disbursement. We couldn't with the equipment because the chips were already pre-sold ahead of time for years because of companies like Apple. And like Jason 13th was saying, he says one of the examples with the smart cars.
Mm-hmm.
What was one of the many reasons why used cars, I remember the used car market shot up in value like crazy because of the fact that manufacturing is in the toilet because they can't get the chips because all the computers on board of these cars need those chips and they can't make them. So okay, used cars and people still need cars, but used car values shooting up. It was crazy. Simbu, what else? What else are we forgetting?
I don't know how much you want me to go because I can't remember all the other questions.
Maybe one more if you have one more thing because I do want to move on to the next question after
okay
after the next.
Now I'm gonna get away from the supply and demand and I'm gonna touch on the human connection that everybody so far has mentioned. Not only was there social distancing, not only were office buildings being shut down. Okay, now you think of that like, oh well, these guys are programmers, they're developers, they can work from home. They can take their computer, their laptops home, and they can work on their laptops. Well, yes, they can, but there is a difference. Just like with us sitting here right now on this podcast, the only two that are together are Fox and Jamie Owls. They are the only two in the same place. So if we were all a game dev company right now, Fox and Jamie Owls can sit there and just go, "Hey, Fox, come here. I want you to take a look at this real quick." And Fox would trot from wherever he is over to take a look at her screen and go, "Okay, I like this, but this needs to be fixed." Okay, real simple. But let's say I'm building something. I build a 3D panoramic fly through of a world. Instead of being able to say, "Hey, Fox, come here real quick and take a look at this and tell me what you think," I now have to compress and zip folder that file. I have to now email it over to him to have him unzip it, open it up, watch it, then wait for his response. So the big problem with that is now instead of, "Hey, I did this one little thing with this twist tie," now it's like, I got the twist tie, I got the cup, I got, these cords, I got all this. I'm trying, they try to maximize the amount of information that they can send at one time so that they can, and then of course Fox gets all my stuff and he has to watch it, he has to look over it, he has to, critique it, and then he has to write me a list of what he's expecting. The big issue with that is he can write it out, but if he writes it out, how well can I interpret what he's saying versus him literally sitting there right over my shoulder looking at it as I'm showing it to him and going, "Okay, well, this little piece right here, I'd like that changed to do this, or this little piece I'd like to change instead to look like this, or this, looks great, but I'd like to see you do this here."
So one of the things with that, what you're describing would be technology from like the early to mid aughts. A lot of these programmers and everything, they have stuff like Slack and Teams and Google Chat and everything. So if that was the case, even with it being 2019, 2020 technology, they just do a share the screen and okay, I share the screen. I like this view, this flyover, everything like that. So they don't need to zip it or anything like that and email that out. But your counter argument to me on there is, yeah, but Fox, the problem with that is it's you're only as powerful as both mine and your internet connection. And if for some reason you are bottlenecked because, oh, let's see, the entire country is working from home and all the home networks are experiencing higher call volume than normal, higher throttled networks, then yeah, that awesome, beautiful 4K landscape that you've rendered is going to look like complete shit on a 7020p type screen that is only going at 15 frames per second. That is exactly to your point, Simbu, that is not conducive to good artistry.
Right, which is why I specifically stated zip foldering it and emailing it or file transferring it directly to you so that you could watch it in all its glory as if you were standing right here over my shoulder and looking at my screen.
Yeah, and so it's like, okay, do I want to see it live and get your critique live so you're over the shoulder and view it at the 720p 15 frame a second garbage, or do you want to wait 2 hours for the file to both send and receive to view it as I guess it would be a best case scenario. If I kind of wish Astrimedes was here because then he'd be able to say, okay, the reality is we could just talk over Slack for something like coding and you could share a screen and view the code and see what's what. But when it comes to a graphical scenario, yes, you have that let's walk over to my screen is going to be a really good like discussion point and everything. And really, like you said, you were talking about the sociological aspect. I want to move into that and specifically like how we perceive time. This is an important thing because I've heard a lot of people say they've experienced time differently with COVID. So I'll ask you guys, do you happen to agree with this? Has this made it seem like not as much time has passed since the consoles has initially released? Hardicus, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, as someone who still does not have a PS5, hearing news that like, oh, the PS5 Pro is coming out soon, and oh, the PS6 is due out in 27 or whatever it is. To me, that's like, holy shit, where the hell did this generation go? Like, to me,
Right?
it feels like the beginning because I haven't actually gotten one yet. But so I think I'm a little more in of a unique perspective than you guys, having one. So yeah, I mean, it's COVID definitely kind of messed with that whole reality a little bit when, I mean, granted, I am also out in the country, so social distancing was not an issue whatsoever for me because you're in the country, you don't have big cities or anything like that wade through. So, but yeah, the 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 generation still feels like, I wouldn't say relatively new, but still newer because of just not having one. I think is probably the biggest factor for me personally.
Yeah, and there's something to be said whether or not you have a necessity to get one. We're gonna be talking about that a little bit later. But Jason 13, how about you? Would you agree with that? Is there has it made like not as much time has passed since these consoles have released?
I've never actually thought about it before. And now that I am thinking about it, I don't know, maybe because work life and real life is a little bit more hectic and everything that I haven't really focused on that. But in the long run, now that I'm thinking about it, it does seem like it's been a long time between the generations, and yet I haven't been paying attention to it, so it doesn't seem like it's been so long. So it is kind of interesting that you bring that up, that it actually has been a long time when, in fact, with all the craziness that's gone on in the last few years, that it doesn't feel like it's been so long.
That's definitely fair. Jamie Owls, is that your sentiment too?
I still think it's 2022. I look at the calendar, I'm like, oh, it's 2024.
Um, Simbu, how about you? Does the whole perception of time, COVID's kind of smearing it?
Well, yeah. I mean, for let's be honest. The world was held hostage for what, 2 years? Like I'm talking, you know, held legitimately hostage for about a year, but it took a whole other year to get the world back to normal, so to speak. And of course, I'm not trying to downplay anything that anything that happened during it. But again, when you look at things logically and logistically, it was held. We were shut down. The world was globally shut down basically for a year. Then it had to take another year to jumpstart the world and get it back to where it was pre 2020, March 2020, when all the shutdowns and everything and standstill all took place. Um, so yeah, we lost a good about 2 years right there. Um, Not to mention keep going forward. Uh, usually when the new gen comes out, usually they still dev for the old gen for a couple years, but then usually by the third to fourth year, you really see them start ramping out the new console stuff. And they start kind of putting the old console out to pasture. You're not seeing that this time around. We're not seeing that. Look at Xbox with the XS, and still they're still putting stuff out for the Xbox One. Um, Sony's still putting out stuff for the PS4. And again, it comes down to the fact that if a game dev cycle is on average 3 to 5 years, we're looking at a 6 to 7 year dev cycle to
Yeah,
10 possibly because of the shutdown basically.
yeah, and you're 100% right. And it kind of moves into my next question of how much you believe that's impacted the overall sentiments for the ninth gen if we're still getting games meant for two generations at once. Like again, I'm an old dog, so I grew up with the NES, which released in 1985. The Super Nintendo released in late 91. And we were still getting NES games in like early 94. That's when Kirby's Adventure came out. But that was the last, like one of that, and like Wario's Woods was like one of the last NES games. So feasibly, that's like 2 to 3 years after the next gen system had released. When the Nintendo 64 came out in 96, the last Super Nintendo games were in 97 and 98. For the Nintendo 64, that was a hell of a lot more truncated. The GameCube came out in 01, and the last 64 games were like in 01 and 02. So all of that being said, and I'm using Nintendo specifically because that's one of my most known entities. The idea that okay, we're still getting PS4 games are still coming out. Uh, Jedi Survivors, for example, that came out on the PS5, and the PS4 version just released what a couple weeks ago, Simbu?
I can't 100% remember. I have Survivor on PS5.
Yeah, and,
um
and so like they spent the time after releasing it on PS5 back deving it for the PS4. Like that's interesting. And
well, you want a perfect example. Hogwarts Legacy. Hogwarts Legacy, perfect example. A highly publicized, very well selling, shot in the dark game that just blew everything out of the water. Well, again, you want to talk then what they do? They spent the next 6 months back deving it for the PS4, the Xbox One, as well as the Nintendo Switch.
I thought Hogwarts Legacy on the PS4 released a month after on the PS5. I know there was a 6 month delay on the Switch, but I mean, let's be honest, that's essentially like back deving it to get it on a PS3, right? I mean, Power Eyes.
something like that. But the point is that they were still, they're still back deving when they shouldn't have needed to be back deving by that point.
And yeah, and it's a thing that like what is it, God of War Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West, these are new games that released over a year after the PS5 came out, and they're still getting backwards developed for the PS4. Um, Jason, what are your thoughts on that? How much do you believe the fact that they're developing for two systems at once? How do you believe this has impacted overall sentiments for the ninth generation?
So I've got kind of a curiosity question to go along with this, because I know companies aren't your friends, but by numbers and sales of their systems and how much people were buying things, would that have had any impact on, hey, guess what? There's still more PS4s out there than PS5s. So we know not as many people are buying it, or maybe even have the money to spend for the newer systems that made them keep making it for the PS4 over the PS5, or Xbox One over the X, or to where they know that they can make the money by selling the games to the older systems, because not everyone has those newer systems.
Yeah, it's even like a developer's choice. Like it looks good on a PowerPoint, Microsoft PowerPoint to the shareholders that, hey, we're releasing a game that is not only going to be on the newest system that has 20 million units sold, but it's also on the existing system that is currently in 80 million homes of it's currently in 80 million homes. So
Right.
that way we have full accessibility at both places.
So during the start of everything, when like PS5 had the shortage on systems, they know that 90, well, maybe not that high, but say 75% of people don't have the PS5 yet, have the PS4 still. So by making the games on both systems, they realize that it's selling good on the PS4 still. So they've just been stuck into that now, to where now pretty much every game that comes out, you may as well make it for the old system too if nobody's upgrading.
And you got to think like, okay, if I can't get a PS5 because of COVID, but I like I'm at Walmart and I see a couple PS4 Pros there. I'll snag a PS4 Pro.
Right. Yeah.
I can play these games. It's good. It's still gonna look well. It's still gonna look decent, and
Mm-hmm.
it will run. So why not? There's also the idea of maybe diminishing returns, possibly like between the PS4 and 5, where the only real improvements are, yes, there is a improvement in like horsepower and a little bit graphically, but the biggest thing that I can think of it truly is the SSD. Like going from a 20 to 30 second load time to, I will say, going down to a 0 to 2 second load time is pretty fan freaking tastic. I've been enjoying that. Jamie Owls, how much do you believe that the development, getting games released both on the PS4 and 5 at the same time, how much do you think that's impacted overall sentiment for this generation of gaming that we're in now?
Um, Honestly, I have to admit that it surprised me how many PS4 games were still being made while we had the PS5. And now that's been going on for the PS5 has been around for almost like 4 years. Will be five next year. Um, at this point, I thought there would be more like PS5 makes versus the PS4. And it makes sense too because there's still a lot of people to this day that can't get or afford the PS5. So I think it's only fair to continue making the PS4 games for people who unfortunately can't have the PS5 yet. So I mean, I'm guessing the next generation, if they'll stop making the PS5 once the PS6 comes out. So
And that makes sense. And it really the whole affordability, and we're going to touch upon that when we have a little bit of a discussion of Sony's next system, because we have thoughts here at the Inferno Cast. We got some thoughts about that, but Hardicus, same question. Want to get your thoughts how releasing stuff both on the PS4 and 5 or on the Xbox Series systems and One systems, how much you believe this has impacted the overall sentiments for the current ninth generation. You're asking you last because this is your feedback is important since you don't have the PS5.
Well, as far as the Xbox, I couldn't tell you the difference between an X, an S, and a Z or whatever the hell they name their things. But for the PlayStation, it's I'm really glad that they still release things on the 4 because, there are people like myself who do not have a 5 yet. Um, so having the option to play things that like I am itching to play the Ratchet and Clank on PS5, but I'm not sure it's even out on the PS4. I haven't really looked into it. Um, but like the other one is the Horizon game. I really enjoyed the first one. I'm really looking forward to playing the second one. I also have an interesting way of looking at it too, of like I want to play that game how it was designed to be played. So that's why I haven't gotten it on the PS4. I want to play it in that, the more beautiful PS5 setting that it was made for. So I can't. I'm weird, so I'm sure people, there's got to be a couple of people that have that same view, but it's probably not the majority. So yeah, I think it's great that they released the PS4 games still. You've got that. You're always going to have that lull of, yes, there are people that run out and get the new iPhone, the new PlayStation, this year's new model. But you're also going to have plenty of people out there that are still going to have their old faithful until, they feel it's necessary to upgrade or have the extra cash to upgrade, things like that.
Yeah, and the whole cash thing, as Jamie Owls had also said too, that if it ain't broke, why spend money to replace it? If the PS4 is still working fine and it's still running, there's no need or sense to get a 5, especially like the one word that will get this cast banned and removed from all the algorithms, inflation. And it's been hurting all of us. And the funny thing is, here in the States where we are recording from, we have not been hurt too badly on the Sony cost increases like other regions have been hurt, especially like Japan. The yen is really, really weak right now in Japan. And so like the PS5 has seen like increases anywhere, I think upwards up to $130 US from when it originally released in 2020. So imagine, okay, it's 2024 and now the PS5, the normal one that was 500, yeah, it's 600, like $650 now. And not like that's the reality in Japan. Like it's untenable, and it's not surprising that that's one of the many reasons why there's such a dominance of Nintendo Switch and Nintendo in general in Japan. But that's just one of the many reasons why Sony is weaker than Nintendo in Japan, and why Nintendo is strong. And we could do a whole podcast on that in of itself. But yeah, I want to I'll kind of move gears, sticking with Sony, because they're following the same playbook that they did. I mentioned a little bit before, but they're following the same playbook that they had during the active time of the PS4, where the PS4 was at, now where we're at with the PS5, like 4 or 5 years after. They're going to release the PS5 Pro this year. So 4 years after the release of the PS5, we're going to be getting the PS5 Pro. So if we've seen this sort of failure to launch of the current gen consoles, like what the heck sort of headwinds does the PS5 Pro have in appealing to consumers? Hardicus, I'll ask you that question because you kind of touched upon it a little bit with your last answer. Like, what sort of headwinds does the PS5 Pro have in appealing to consumers?
Well, I can't speak for anyone else but myself, but I've seen some comparisons to the PS5 and the PS5 Pro. I've heard a lot of people talk about how, it's going to be faster and sharper in the background and things like that. Just from what I've personally seen of videos side by side, to me it does not compare for that kind of price hike. Now, I am also cheap, so that's one factor for myself. But what is it, $700 for the Pro or something like that? Yeah, I can't justify $700 Pro for to me what looks like just barely better than
So I
the
will
regular.
add it's $700 for a digital only Pro. Keeping in mind when the PS4 released, the digital was 400,
Mhm.
and the $700 again does not include the now $80 disk drive and $20 vertical stand.
Yeah, see, and you and I have talked about this before. I just mentioned it too. I live in the country. I have shitty internet. It is, I'm glad I've gotten a little bit better in the last year with, a new company coming out here. But prior to that, my max speed was 1.5 megabyte download speed. That was the
Mm.
max I would see. Can you imagine trying to download anything close to these AAA titles that are 100 gigs on that? It would take me
So the 300
a month.
gigabyte newest Call of Duty that's coming out, was it next month? The 300 gigabyte one. So that would probably take you up into from between now and the release date if they allowed you to download it ahead of time. Maybe by the release date in the end of
Well,
October, you'd be able to play
for
it.
If I was lucky.
forget downloading a game. Try downloading a 300 megabit update for a game.
Oh yeah, it takes a while. And as I mentioned on here before, excuse me, I'm a World of Warcraft player. There's updates all the time. So, if you don't play that, earlier in that day and you've got raid that night, well, here's a 300 megabyte download before you can even log in. And that
Mm.
at 1.5, that used to take me quite a while. And it's not like that was, just the cheapest option I had, blah blah blah. It was the only option I had out here.
And that is we've talked about this on the Inferno cast. The poor infrastructure for a lot of stuff here in the States, especially with internet, that is a very real situation for a lot of individuals in the States, and I'd argue the more rural areas of Canada too, where we're limited on choice. What's there isn't great. And then you mentioned 1.5 megabits a second. That's assuming that it's working as what you're
Yes.
paying.
Yes.
And let's say
That it's
you're
holding.
sorry,
Mhm.
that's assuming your idiot brother isn't taking the part of the bandwidth from downloading his hentai. What are you going to do if he is?
True. Also, let me clarify. Like yeah, I'm out in the cornfields, but I'm only about 2 hours outside of Chicago. So it's not like I'm in, you know, the middle of Kansas where there's nothing. I am literally 2 hours outside of Chicago. There's the best option right now is like T-Mobile 5G, and that's what I have right now, and I absolutely love it compared to what I had.
And that's the thing with you still being close to a metropolitan area, like it's still crazy that you finally now have that. And I apologize, Simbu, I cut you off. Did you?
Oh, I was gonna say. I mean, with what Hardicus is saying, just only 2 hours outside of Chicago. You know, that puts you what Hart from over here from Basement of the Dead in Aurora. That puts you what about an hour ish from Basement, roughly.
I don't remember exactly where Aurora is, but I would say if you're in the Chicagoland area, about an hour and a half to 2 hours in that area. Like it takes me about, I would say, an hour and 45 to get to Inferno's house.
Okay.
Okay, okay. So again, and this and Illinois is northern Illinois is a big metropolitan suburban area. It's not until you start getting down towards like Bourbonnais and areas like that and Effingham that Illinois truly becomes like middle of nowhere Kansas. But he's still in the northern part of Illinois. So you look at that too. Places like Indiana. Once you get like 30 to 40 minutes outside of Indianapolis, there's nothing.
Mhm.
To be
Are
fair,
you
though,
look
Indiana is also back in the 1950s for just about everything.
That's true.
true? But no, okay, so all right, well, I'll use a different city. I'll use Gary, Indiana, the ghost town of Indiana that is still somehow a major city.
Hey, now that's the birthplace of Michael Jackson. So,
It is. And I've been past his house on my way to the company I work for's branch in Gary, Indiana. But the fact is that you look at Gary, Indiana, it's a ghost town, but it's still a major city.
Besides that like sort of internet issue or anything, Simba, what are your thoughts on the type of headwinds the PS5 Pro would have to appealing to consumers?
Unless you're the one that wants to go, I got the pro. Okay. If you're one of those chest beaters and you just want to say you have it, then that's all really the headwinds it is. It is the pro is a $200 plus slap in the face
You
to
mean it's
every
not going to
Sony
make me
faithful.
better at Call of Duty?
Well, it will. It will for you.
But again, the thing is and Fox, we've touched on it. We've talked about this at length. We've touched on it in previous episodes. The 4 to the Pro was needed. It was needed for one reason. 4K became consumerly affordable.
Yep.
What I challenge any of our listeners, and please in the comments below. Hold on, you can't see the twist tie, but in the comments below, what 8K have you used on your PS5 so far?
And think about what 8K games have you played besides The Tourist? Because as far as I know, The Tourist is the only 8K game that I know that's out and was supported by the PS. By the way, Simbu, did you notice that new PS5s, they got rid of the 8K moniker on the box?
Uh-huh. Yep.
Yep. Because Sony was assuming that if it would follow that same sort of trajectory with the PS4. PS4, oh, that's HD. PS4 Pro is 4K. Now the PS5 is going to be 8K. Well, you know what? There's a reason why, DVD and Blu-ray are still a thing because they work and people will use what works. It's kind of the heart of the matter of people still using PS4s and people why the ninth generation possibly hasn't launched as well because the 4 still works. Everything's still, and maybe even I kind
My
of
regular
again,
4 still works.
yeah, regular 4,
I don't even have the Pro.
and like
My daughter has the regular 4 and it still works.
and like this is another thing I really wish Astrimedes was here because he would talk about the dev aspect for 5 minutes and he would say how the 4 is now was so much easier to develop for than like the PS3, not only just because of how the unique infrastructure of the internals of the PS3, but the PS4 as well as like the Xbox One and anything up to that point are more PC-like than they've ever been before. That being said, with them having that sort of similar architecture, it's easy to develop than the stuff before. So hey, let's just develop it for the 4 and then upres it for the 5. Or like Simbu and I were talking about, you got something like Hogwarts Legacy. Let's develop for the 5 and then see what we can do to downgrade it to the 4 or make a miracle port for the Switch. Like, I don't know if Hogwarts Legacy I've actually heard doesn't run too bad on the Switch. It's not like the travesty that's Mortal Kombat 1, but still, like you can get some really good stuff with that. Jason the 13th, what are your thoughts if uh what sort of headwinds do you see the PS5 Pro having in appealing to consumers and just in general?
Like Simbu said, it's going to be more I got the newest system. I've got the, yep, because I don't see a whole lot of benefits. I know I have no plans on getting a PS5 Pro unless my PS5 somehow dies. There's no point for me getting a Pro.
Careful, Sony may be listening to this cast.
If they kill my
Especially without a disk
PS5,
drive.
if they kill my PS5, then they're gonna have to kill my PS4 too.
So
One line of code. That's all it'll take.
So my thoughts on this are exactly like Simbu's, in the sense that the purpose of the Pro is to be that niche product set to entice a specific type of consumer. The PS4 Pro encompasses only like about 10 to 15% of the entirety of PS4 sales. So there was a specific audience for that.
Yep.
And that was, even like Simbu was saying, that was a needed upgrade to take advantage of a 4K TV structure. And only 10 to 15% of people bought into that. You look at now where, like Simbu had said, 8K is not grabbing consumers as much as 4K was, simply because, there was you could notice a bit of a difference between HD and 4K. It's a lot harder to notice a difference between 4K and 8K. And that's not to say like who is supporting 8K on live like TV and stuff, live streaming.
Yep.
Do we even have the infrastructure, going back to what I said, to support live 8K streaming? Because I'm betting a lot of areas outside major cities don't. So the idea, the trade.
Hold on, Fox.
Yeah.
I want to interrupt you because you touched on something I was hoping somebody would, and that is recognition of what type of HD or K you are watching. For example, my wife, when we watched The Mandalorian on Disney Plus, it was shot in 4K. We have a 4K TV. We were able to watch it in native 4K. My wife could not tell the difference. She could not tell her visually. She could not tell the difference between depth of field and everything like that. As to where when I'm watching it in 4K, I can see that depth of field. You can see the difference in the camera panning. You can see the difference in motion.
And the joke is that Jason can't. As we've said before, Jason has a hard time telling the difference between
on certain things.
Yep.
On certain things. Some things are clear. Some things are not.
Right. But again, as Fox said, he brought it up, and as I elaborated, if people can't tell the difference between 4K, or if people have a hard time telling the difference between 4K and HD, 1080, well, what is the difference is even more subtle between 4K and 8K.
And I watched the trailer on the PS5 Pro live when it streamed, and I was lucky because I was on a very solid internet connection to do it on a 4K stream. I was probably one of the very few who didn't get throttled by like just having to view it on like what is it, 480 or 720p. I saw it on 4K, and even I had a hard time telling some of the difference between the footage on the PS5 Pro and the PS5. And when Mark Cerny was talking about it, he was so like, you see me on my screen here, if you're watching on YouTube now, focusing just on my nose. They had to focus just on my nose to tell the difference between what it was on the PS5 and the PS5 Pro graphically, because it is a law of diminishing returns. And my biggest issue with the trailer for the PS5 Pro, the very first gameplay that they showed was a PS4 game. And therein lies the failure to launch, where we're now in the mid-gen, and literally in that trailer, they feature a PS4 game on PS5 Pro footage. So it's the idea that like, have we really failed to launch, or are we just in this now new gray area? And the kind of last part of the discussion is going to be going to this guy right here. I'm pointing on those not watching on YouTube but listening to my Big N Nintendo shirt, where Nintendo is absolutely exempt from all of the questions that I've raised with their 9th gen entry, the Nintendo Switch. Absolutely, because it is the most successful console of the 9th gen by a wide margin, because as of June 30th, 2024, it has sold 144 million units worldwide. That is over double the 61.7 million units of the PS5 and 4 times the 29.7 million of both the Xbox Series systems. Why were they so successful? Because they did not have the failure to launch? I'd argue because they couldn't afford to fail. And what was the system beforehand, they had to launch from being the very excellent and awfully terribly marketed piece of crap that was the Wii U. So Jason the 13th, you know what? No, not Jason the 13th. I'm gonna ask Jamie Owls. Jamie Owls, what do you believe has been Nintendo's key features, key ideas to success this generation with the Nintendo Switch? What do you think made the Nintendo Switch so successful, maybe compared to its competitors?
Mm, what made them so successful?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I I want to say is coming out with different types of consoles, be with the Switch being like the first handheld type of console to play. Um,
Like being a hybrid, you mean, where you can play a handheld
Hybrid, yeah,
and dock it and play it on the TV?
exactly. Because before that, when they came up with when the Wii came out, the motion controllers. Like I thought that was kind of like a neat idea for people to try to play a game using like a wand type controller to get your character move and do stuff because no other well besides with like Duck Hunt you have that gun, so technically Nintendo or that was the first one, but to come up with an actual control, I thought that was neat. So I always thought Nintendo always come up with like really cool ideas for like their consoles.
Yeah, and the idea to innovate with their hardware as well as software. Yeah, I could see that. And it's funny,
Yeah.
you can almost say like the Wii U was like a beta, a pre-beta to the Switch because it had where you could play on the screen while the console is there, but
Yeah.
you were limited by like 10 or 15 feet or something. You couldn't travel further away from it.
And it was too blocky.
Yeah, it kind of felt like one of those play school tablets for
Hmm.
preschoolers holding in your hands a big Wii U tablet. Jason the 13th also is kind of a big fan of the Big N. What do you believe has been Nintendo's key features to success this generation compared to the competitors?
I would say the portability, but surprisingly, everywhere I go and I take my Switch, I see nobody else with a Switch around. So I don't know how portability works,
Now,
but I
now, now,
think,
where are you going that
oh,
you're not?
just like conventions and different places where
Hentai.
I'm sitting there killing time. To where I'll pull out my Switch and I'll play it, and I don't see anyone else go around just having a Switch anywhere they go, basically. But I also think that it came out at the right time with a few different games that were became super popular during COVID times there.
Well, keep in
The
mind the Switch came out in March of 2017 and COVID hit in 2020. Really,
Right.
it hit its stride, especially in 2018 with the port of Mario Kart 8 and stuff like that.
And I was also going to go to Stormrose which where she would go to in this one. Animal Crossing New Horizons came out. Everyone who's never played an Animal Crossing game was playing Animal Crossing. It
It,
gave people stuff to do during COVID while we're all stuck
Hmm.
at home.
and that's still, I think, the second or third most sold game on the Switch. And I was mistaken. The Mario Kart 8 Deluxe released 2017, not 2018. But still, like you had Nintendo have such a jump above all the competitors because they had to. The Wii U was a
Oh
flop.
yes. if they would have flopped again with the system, Nintendo might have been out of the race completely.
Yeah, that would have been really interesting because it's like they were one of the few wanting to avoid stuff like mobile kicking and screaming. They finally acquiesced with stuff like that. Mario Kart Tour, I think, the Super Mario Run. There was an Animal Crossing, a Fire Emblem game, and then there's another RPG type game that I can't remember that Nintendo released. So they did it, but fortunately, mobile gaming, I'm glad to say, has not ever taken the place of video games as
Yes.
we know them.
Yes. I am so glad that Nintendo put out the Switch and it became a big hit.
Because one of the things Nintendo does, and Jamie Owls was talking about the Wii for a little bit, the motion control. You get a lot of the competitors kind of following and nipping at Nintendo's heels with PlayStation and the Move and Xbox and the Kinect. It's a good thing that Nintendo innovates because then these companies can continue innovating themselves, which is
Mhm.
what we got with stuff like the Steam Deck and the PlayStation Portal, which apparently the PlayStation Portal, I've heard, if you got a stable Wi-Fi connection, works very well. I've heard nothing but good things with the $200 PlayStation Portals, which is essentially like the Wii U tablet. And I mean, really, it's like that, except I think I've actually heard you can play it portably. You just need constant Wi-Fi connection on your home PS5 and wherever you are at with the Portal. Um,
Hmm.
Hardicus, your thoughts on what you believe has been Nintendo's key features to success this generation?
I think Jimmy L's kind of nailed it pretty well. And Jason brought up some great points too, like the whole being a kind of a different console, having that portability feature, or just what do they call it, the kickstand mode or whatever too, is just like I know someone who had a kid that played it like that a lot. So like that whole aspect I think helped out a lot. Um, Animal Crossing definitely helped out a lot, especially when like COVID hit. I mean, I've never played Animal Crossing, but I played Animal Crossing New Horizons. It just, that game kind of came out of having so much free time for people being on lockdowns and things like that, that really, even spoke to me of like, hey, this might be a fun game for you to play. So I tried it too. Part of, I think, the Wii U's problem is, and this is just, me personally here, like until I would say in the last year or so, I didn't even know the Wii U was a separate console. I thought it was an accessory for the Wii. So I mean, I think marketing is one
Yes.
of their things. I had no idea the Wii U was a separate console than the Wii. Thought it was just some sort of accessory piece that they came out with. But I saw Switch commercials every time, and I don't even watch TV that much. I saw Switch commercials all the time on television and especially the internet. So,
Yeah.
like, I think marketing, they really hit the marketing on it constantly.
And I mean, those Switch commercials, those people looked just like me. They looked just like us. And they were out and about doing cool things
Uh-huh.
like playing basketball and skateboarding. And once they were done, they would then play the Switch right there outdoors. But that's the point. Marketing and saying
Mm-hmm.
this is what you can do. You're playing Zelda, right there on like on the airplane or skateboarding after hanging out with friends, still right there in the park. You pause the game and you just dock it, and boom, it immediately goes on your TV, which it does. That was a marketable feature and a proven feature with the Switch. One of the things is at the same time that the Wii U was flopping, the 3DS was like their little life raft that sort of kept Nintendo afloat. And even then, they only continued games about a year or two after the Switch released. Like the last games that came out were in 2018. And again, Switch released 2017. So Nintendo knew when to discontinue. And that's something the other consoles aren't doing, but they don't really need to. One of the things with the Switch is they've received a number of ports and collections from their previous systems from not only just like the Wii U with stuff like Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, Mario Kart 8 to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, but like you get collections from old PlayStation games like the Tomb Raider Remastered collection, which is a PlayStation series. Now it's on the Switch. The Crash and Spyro trilogies, they're on the Switch. Everything is on the Switch. That was a joke back in 2018 or 2019, an IGN April Fool's thing where they showed all these crazy um things like Doom and Doom Eternal and Witcher 3 that's on the Switch. I remember it being part of the joke. And then all of them between then and now, except GTA 5, released on the Switch. Although the GTA Definitive Edition trilogy did release on the Switch. So they've been able to release wholly new content for their franchises while supporting third-party and indie devs during this time. But I want to give this last question, the same question I posed to our very excellent um, devil's advocate, Simbu. What do you believe has been Nintendo's key features to success this generation compared to competitors? For me, purposely knowing that you are either a devil's advocate and ensuring that you get the last word on this last question.
Oh.
I'm doing this on purpose.
Well, let me I had to run away for a second, as you all watching on YouTube saw. I ran away. Jason the 13th will get a good laugh out of this one because I have visuals. And first, before I get to those, hey Fox, what did Sega say when they released the Genesis? What did they say? Was it
It's funny. I'm like 299, but that was Sony in response to Sega.
okay? Well, okay. So what did Sony? So what Sony said to Sega? 299. That's what Nintendo said to Sony. That is one of the big successes of the Nintendo Switch is the fact that Nintendo did to Sony what Sony did to Sega.
And the entry point really is 199 with the Nintendo Switch Lite.
Right. But either way, you know, you have the Nintendo Switch Lite with the 199 or you go full tilt with the 299 version. The fact of that matter remains though is that the Switch Lite can run 90% of Nintendo games. There are only very few Nintendo games, and I can't even actually think of any, that you cannot play on the Switch Lite. That can only be played on the regular Switch. I'm sure Fox can look it up and find them if people really want to list. I'm sure you can Google it. I'm sure there are some. Not saying there's a lot, but again, I'm gonna let's be generous here. And 95% of Switch games can be played on the Switch Lite without issue. The other thing, let's go. Like I said, Sony told Sega $299. Nintendo told Sony and Microsoft $299 or $199 for Switch Lite. For pedantry's sake here. You can buy one PS4, one PS5, one Xbox X, or you can buy two Switches. Three if you buy lights for roughly the same price. Roughly.
And if you're a parent and you have like 3 kids, it almost makes sense just to get the 3 Switches and then you do like Mario Kart or something. Nintendo's got this like coupon program where like you buy 2, you get 1 free. You buy that coupon for $100. Nope. Now each of those Switch Lights gets a copy of Mario Kart for $100, $700 for one PS5 Pro. You've got 3 copies of Mario Kart and 3 Nintendo Switch Lights, and you keep your 9, 7, and 5-year-old busy for hours.
Not to mention, let's go with the NSO expansion pass.
Oh,
You know this very well.
The family.
$80, what is it? $80 a year, and you can have what, 8 people?
Yep.
Sony don't do that. Xbox used to do that because Jason the 13th, our buddy Billy, used to have us all on the gold plan with him. He used to get the family plan. I was one that he would put on his family plan.
Yep.
So that I had Xbox Live. Right, for the 360. They stopped it with the one.
Mm-hmm.
But so we've got that whole conversation. That is a huge, as people again look to entertain their kids in this massively technologically driven world.
Yep.
The Switch has found success with the $199 and the $299. And that is where they have found some of their biggest success.
And yeah, you could get the OLED one for $350. I mean, I'm the idiot that spent the extra $50 to get it, and I found a good use for the existing Switch that I already bought. But like the OLED looks great, works great, and haven't had issues. The big question that we're gonna wonder is whether or not Nintendo can find a foothold for the Switch 2 for $400, which we're going to be finding out here, my prediction, within a week or two.
So one final thought here, and this is to the portability that everyone has started talking about. Jason the 13th, may I ask you, is it easier to transport this, which would be the PS5 or the Xbox X, or is this easier? This would be the Switch. And this is the actual Switch.
First hope that it's in a travel case.
Right. Well, this would be the travel case for the Switch.
Mm-hmm.
Inside the bag, you would also then find the power supply. You would find the dock, and maybe you would find an extra, Pro controller. Maybe the little extra thing to slide the Joy-Cons into play. But I ask you, a book bag, which I'm being thrown away, book bag, or a shopping bag.
And if you spent a little extra money on your case, you could get a case that carried all that in the case, and you don't even have to have the jewel bag.
Right. But the point is that even if I did have that case would be about the size of what? Maybe a little bit smaller than a laptop bag.
Yep.
Like a Chromebook bag, somewhere around like a mini Chromebook bag, about yay big or so.
Yeah. Or do you spend $300 on a refurbished Steam Deck, which automatically comes with a case? And if you've got a Steam library, it all plays on the Steam Deck. And if you know how to do it, it's based on a Linux system. So if you are a fan of shmemulation, you've just gone from your Steam library to 800 plus whatever you can fit on your Steam Deck. It's not like I've done anything like that. No, not at all. We don't condone shmemulation here at Inferno Fox Gaming. But it's been a really good discussion. I feel like the failure to launch is simply because the 8th generation system, specifically like the PS4, is lucrative enough to still have sales of its games and to still have devs release games for not only the fact that I think Simbu mentioned like a 5 to 6 year dev cycle. They were still developing PS4 games and released, and that's probably another one of the many reasons why PS4 games are still getting released. They were still developing for them. But also for the companies that can't, that it wasn't feasible to have the previous generation work like Nintendo. Nintendo found success only because of an excellent innovation that's sort of changed the name of the game of gaming, as well as really paving the way with an economically friendly system as well. So let us know in the comments section below your thoughts about the failure to launch of the 9th generation. We'd love to have a conversation with you. A huge shout out and thank you to the fantastic cast and crew, as well as our audience. parting shots, guys. Any parting shots before we go?
Do you think the PS5 Pro is just so they have something to give your potential customers while we still wait another 2 to 3 years for the PS6?
I think the PS5, me personally, I think the PS5 Pro was one of those many uh, parting decisions, bye-bye decisions that Jim Ryan, the CEO, who's no longer with it, with Sony, made because he had senioritis and he's coasting, and let's just follow the same playbook that we had for the PS4. We're going to do the same thing for the PS5. Oh, this worked for the PS4. We're going to have it. It's kind of like Concord. Oh, the live service thing was a big thing. Let's just continue with it. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Okay. So, but before I go, let me lay off the Sony PlayStation London studio. All right, bye, Felicia. I got my golden parachute. I'm out.
Can we just, all right, I'm just going to say it because I haven't said it yet. And I told everybody here I was going to say it. This is 9th generation with an asterisk.
That's fair. That's fair. I'd say that's fair. So, again, thank you guys. Thank you, everybody. And we hope that you have a great day.